The
kill?
night Sarah's fiancé
You will do as
threatened
I
her in
say,
public,
or there will
someone
be
else was
consequences.
listening. A man known in whispers. A man people feared. But what he did next, no one in that restaurant will ever forget. Sarah thought the worst part of her evening would be the man sitting across from her. She was wrong, because the moment her fiancé leaned in and hissed the words, "You're dead when we get home," a stranger at the next table put down his wine and stood up. And within minutes, Sarah's life would be ripped apart and rebuilt by the most unlikely protector she'd ever meet. But kindness from a man like him always comes with a price. And Sarah was about to discover exactly what that price was. Welcome, my beautiful family and friends, to my YouTube channel. Please click on subscribe, like, share, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, back to the story. On an ordinary evening in the heart of the city, where white tablecloths glowed beneath soft golden lights and the quiet murmur of conversations drifted like warm air, a woman named Sarah sat at a table meant for celebrations, yet braced for survival. From a distance, she looked composed. Proper posture, polite smile, carefully curled hair resting just below her shoulders. But anyone who looked closely would see the truth hiding in the smallest details. The stillness of her hands that wasn't calm, just trained. The way her shoulders curled inward as though trying to shrink without moving. The breath she held every few seconds out of habit, as if waiting for impact. She wasn't tired from the day. She was tired from the last 3 years. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't live in the body, but in the spirit. The kind that whispers, "Be careful. Don't upset him. Not tonight." Across from her sat Marcus, her fiancé, the man she once believed would protect her. The man who now made every dinner feel like a test she could never pass. He scanned the menu with the air of someone accustomed to control, correcting the waiter, correcting Sarah, correcting the world. Sarah had mastered the art of silence. Not the quiet that brings peace, but the quiet born from fear of saying the wrong thing. She studied the pasta on her fork, turning the noodles as if arranging them perfectly could prevent an argument. Her stomach knotted. Every movement felt like it might spark a fire she had spent years trying to contain. She didn't know it, but everything was already shifting. This dinner, this very moment, was about to change her life forever. And somewhere among the clinking glasses and soft jazz, someone else was watching. Not with curiosity, not with judgment, but with the unmistakable attention of a man who understood danger. But Sarah didn't see him yet. She only felt the old familiar dread settling in her chest. Before the story's storm began to rise, before the confrontation that would shake the room to silence, we linger here, on the small, heartbreaking tension of a woman trying to be invisible beside a man who demanded all the space around her. And for those watching this unfold, if you believe no one deserves to feel unsafe at dinner, hit subscribe. Because people like Sarah need voices. And sometimes those voices start with us. Marcus placed his menu down with a soft thud. Not loud, not dramatic, but Sarah knew that sound. It was the sound of a fuse lighting. He leaned back, studied her face for a moment that felt far too long, then said in a voice meant to sound calm, but dipped in accusation, "I saw the way you smiled at the waiter." Sarah's pulse stumbled. She forced a small, measured breath. "I just said thank you," she answered quietly. But quiet wasn't safe. Quiet never softened Marcus, only sharpened him. "That wasn't just a thank you," he said, leaning forward. "You don't smile at other men like that." She felt the heat rise behind her eyes, the humiliation beginning its slow crawl up her throat. The tables nearby continued their conversations, unaware, or pretending to be unaware, of the tension forming like a crack in glass. "I wasn't," she began, but he cut her off. "You were flirting?" A few diners turned their heads. A middle-aged woman paused mid-sentence. A fork clinked against porcelain somewhere to her right. Sarah swallowed hard. "No, Marcus, I wasn't. I was just..." "Just what?" His voice rose. Not enough to shout, but enough to slice through the delicate ambience like a cold blade. The restaurant's soft murmur faltered. And then, like a flame exposed to sudden wind, Marcus's temper snapped into full view. "I asked you a simple question," he hissed. "Were you flirting with him?" The world around them seemed to slow. Not because of what he had said worse, but because of how loud he said it. A hush rolled across the tables, as though an invisible hand pressed pause on every conversation. Glasses hovered halfway to mouths. Napkins froze mid-fold. Even the music felt quieter. The pattern interrupt hit Sarah like a spotlight. Every eye slowly shifting in her direction. Every heartbeat echoing through her like a warning drum. Her cheeks burned with shame. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because she was being publicly reduced, inspected, accused. "I wasn't flirting," she whispered, her voice trembling despite all the years she'd spent training it not to. Marcus leaned in. His lips barely moved as he spoke, but the venom carried. "You embarrass me," he said. "Do you understand that?" She looked down again. Her fork, her hands, her ring, shiny, small, chosen for her, not by her. The dread pressed deeper. She wanted to disappear, shrink into the chair, fade into the candlelight. Because how do you defend yourself when the person you're defending yourself against is the one you've built your life around? He reached across the table, his fingers wrapped around her wrist, not bruising, just firm, controlled, calculated. "Do you understand me?" It wasn't a question. It was a command. The humiliation wasn't the worst part. The silence afterward was. A heavy, breathless quiet that made every sound feel amplified. And in that silence, in that aching pause of the entire restaurant holding its breath, there was something else. Someone was still watching. Not a curious diner. Not a judgmental couple. Not a server frozen in place. Someone who looked at Marcus not with confusion or gossip in their eyes, but with recognition. The recognition of a predator. Sarah didn't see him, but she felt the shift in the air. Like someone had leaned forward in their seat. Like a presence had stirred. And that presence was about to change everything. Marcus stood abruptly, letting his napkin fall onto the table like a dropped threat. "I'm going to the restroom," he snapped. He leaned in close to Sarah's ear. Too close. The heat of his breath filling a space she wished she could escape. "Don't even think about going anywhere." And then he walked away. Sarah let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. It escaped from her chest in a shaky, broken release. Quiet enough not to be seen, painful enough that she felt it in her ribs. For the first time all evening, she looked up, and that was when she saw him. A man sitting alone at the next table. Dark hair swept back, sharp features touched with age, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been tailored by someone who understood power. He didn't pretend to look away. He didn't avert his eyes like the others. He watched Marcus walk toward the restroom. Then, slowly, he turned his gaze to Sarah. Not intrusive, not presumptuous, just observant, focused in a way that made the air shift around her. He held her eyes only for a heartbeat, but in that heartbeat, something unfamiliar flickered in Sarah's chest. Not fear, not shame, not anxiety, but recognition, not because she knew him, but because he understood. And before she could look away, before she could steady herself, the man stood up. Smooth, deliberate, silent. He didn't speak to the waiter. He didn't glance around the room. He simply picked up his glass of wine and sat down in Marcus's empty seat. Sarah's heart lurched. She straightened in shock. What are you?" "You need to listen very carefully," the man said, his voice low, controlled, shaped by an accent she couldn't quite place. "Your fiancé will be back in approximately 90 seconds. She stared at him. Her pulse thundered. Her breath caught in her throat. "Please," she whispered, every instinct she had screaming danger, danger, danger. "If he sees you here, he won't hurt you tonight." The certainty in his tone didn't make sense. It didn't wobble. It didn't question. "You don't know him," she whispered. "You don't know what he's like." The man leaned in slightly, his dark eyes fixed on hers. "I know men like him," he said softly. "I've known hundreds. They all follow the same pattern." His voice wasn't cruel. It wasn't condescending. It was calm, steady, as if he were stating a weather forecast. "They find someone kind," he continued. "Someone gentle. Someone who will bend themselves into shapes to keep the peace. And then they break them down piece by piece until the only thing left is fear." Sarah felt her breath falter. Her chest tightened. She had never heard a stranger describe her life with such chilling accuracy. She didn't even know his name. "I'm fine," she murmured automatically, the reflex she perfected over years of defending Marcus's behavior to others, and sometimes to herself. The man shook his head, slowly, almost sadly. "You're not," he said. "But you could be." Sarah felt something stir inside her. Something fragile. Something that hadn't been there in a long time. "Hope, why do you care?" she asked, voice breaking. "You don't even know me." A flicker crossed his face, too quick to identify. "Let's just say," he murmured, "I have a particular dislike for men who threaten women in public restaurants." He lifted his glass, taking a slow sip as if the room wasn't watching them, as if he wasn't rewriting the trajectory of her evening and her life. Before she could speak again, she saw it. Marcus's reflection in the window approaching. The storm returning. Panic seized her body. Her voice cracked. "Please, you have to go." But the man didn't move, didn't shift, didn't even blink. "Let him see," he said quietly. "No, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." And then, with a calmness that made her feel steadier than she had any right to feel, he asked, "The question is, do you want help? Or do you want to keep pretending this is love?" The words hit her harder than Marcus's threats ever had. And before she could answer, before she could even think, Marcus reached the table. His voice erupted. "What the hell is this?" The room tensed again. The hush returned. Like everyone knew something was unfolding, something they wouldn't forget. The man finally stood. Not abruptly, not defensively, just purposefully. He faced Marcus, and for the first time in years, Sarah saw fear in Marcus's eyes. "I overheard you threatening this woman," the man said calmly. "I thought I should introduce myself." Marcus sputtered. "Who the hell are you?" The man answered with a name that dropped into the room like a stone into still water. "Luca Moretti." Marcus froze. His anger drained. His posture shrank. His bravado evaporated into a pale, trembling silence. Because Marcus recognized the name. Everyone did. But Sarah didn't. Not yet. She only felt one thing in that moment. The smallest spark of safety she'd felt in years. And for those listening to this story now, if you'd stand up for a stranger the way Luca did, comment, "I stand for courage." Because in that restaurant, courage came from the most unexpected table. For a moment, the restaurant existed in a strange vacuum. A space where time held its breath, where every eye settled on the three figures at the table. Sarah, trembling, Marcus, red-faced and sputtering, and the man who had just spoken a name that shifted the entire atmosphere. Luca Moretti. The name moved through the room like a silent current, an unspoken warning disguised as mere syllables. People didn't have to say anything. They simply knew. It was the kind of name that demanded stillness, the kind of name only spoken quietly or never at all. Marcus knew it too. You could see the recognition land in him like a punch to the ribs. His face blanched. His mouth opened, then shut again. His breath grew shallow. I didn't realize, Marcus began, his bravado collapsing so fast it was almost pitiful. "I didn't know you were." Luca didn't flinch, didn't soften, didn't try to hide the truth Marcus was choking on. "I'm exactly who you think I am," he said quietly. "And I heard every word you said to her." Marcus's eyes darted to Sarah, then back to Luca. He swallowed hard, tried to collect the scraps of his dignity. "It was just an argument," Marcus said, his voice stumbling. "She's my fiancée. We've been together for 3 years. This is a private matter." Luca angled his head slightly, as if examining a piece of art he found unimpressive. "Nothing you said was private," he replied. "And I don't tolerate men who threaten women. Not in public. Not anywhere." Marcus took a nervous step back, like a cornered animal suddenly aware of its own fragility. The room watched in stunned stillness. "Listen," he said, his voice cracking. "I apologize if I overreacted. I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," Luca murmured. Another step back, and then, as if conjured from shadows, 2 men appeared behind Marcus. They hadn't been there a moment ago. At least no one had noticed them. But now they stood with the precision of soldiers and the quiet menace of ghosts. They didn't touch Marcus. They didn't need to. Their presence spoke for them. Marcus looked between them, panic rising like a wave. What is this?" he asked. "Escort Mr. Brennan out," Lucas said. He glanced at Sarah for only a moment, and she whispered the last name automatically, her voice barely audible. "Brennan. Mr. Brennan," Luca continued smoothly, "will not be returning to any establishment I'm affiliated with." Marcus's chest heaved. His eyes darted wildly, searching for an ally in the sea of strangers who'd just watched him crumble. But he had none. As the men flanked him, Marcus snapped, one final attempt to reclaim control. "This isn't over," he shouted shakily, pointing at Sarah. "Do you hear me? This isn't." One of the men leaned in and whispered something, so quiet no one else heard it. Whatever it was, it drained the rest of the color from Marcus's face. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't try to fight. He simply walked, stumbled, toward the exit, swallowed by the two silent escorts. And then he was gone. The restaurant slowly exhaled. Sarah sat frozen, hands trembling uncontrollably, her breath trapped somewhere between her chest and her throat. She didn't know whether to cry, run, or thank the stranger whose very presence had rewritten the entire night. Luca didn't sit immediately. He watched the doors close behind Marcus, ensuring the threat was truly gone before returning to his table. Then, in a tone as soft as it had been dangerous only moments earlier, he looked at Sarah and said, "You should eat something. You've gone pale." His calm didn't erase her fear, but softened it. For the first time in years, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Safety. And for those listening now, that's what real power looks like. If you've ever wished someone would stand up for you the way Luca stood up for Sarah, you're not alone. Sarah's hands shook too hard to pick up her fork. The shock pulsed through her, quiet but consuming, like the aftershocks of a quake. "I don't understand," she whispered. "What just happened?" "You did something difficult," Lucas said, folding his hands on the table with elegance that felt almost old-fashioned. "You stood up for yourself." "I didn't," she murmured. "You did." "No," he corrected gently. "I intervened, but you made the choice not to leave with him." Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. The adrenaline had drained her voice. The tears she'd held back earlier welled now, ready to break. Seeing this, Lucas signaled to the waiter. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't call out. Yet the waiter nearly sprinted over. "Some hot tea for the lady," Lucas said, "and your best tiramisu." The waiter nodded, disappearing instantly. Sarah wiped her cheeks, embarrassed. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he replied, "but you needed it." The tea arrived quickly, steam curling upward like a quiet blessing. Sarah wrapped her hands around the cup, grounding herself in its warmth. Her voice shook. "What am I going to do? We live together. All my things are at his apartment. My car is there. I don't have anywhere to—" "Stop," Lucas said softly. "One problem at a time." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a phone, and made a call while speaking in quiet, fluid Italian. The tone wasn't threatening, just firm, purposeful. When he hung up, he said, "In 1 hour, your belongings will be packed and removed from his apartment. They'll be taken to a secure location. Your car will be retrieved and brought to you." Sarah stared at him. "No," she said shakily. "I can't ask you to do that." "You didn't ask." His voice was steady. "You don't owe me anything. I chose to help." She didn't know whether to be grateful or overwhelmed. The weight of the last 3 years pressed on her, suddenly too heavy to carry another moment. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do all this for someone you don't know?" For the first time tonight, Luca looked away, not in shame but reflection. "My sister," he said quietly. "She was engaged to a man like Marcus. By the time I understood how bad it was almost too late." Sarah's breath stilled. "She's safe now," Luca added. "Married to a good man. Living a peaceful life. But I learned something from her story, something I don't ignore anymore." "What's that?" Sarah whispered. "That sometimes the most important thing you can do," Lucas said, "is refuse to look away." The tiramisu arrived, a plate of sweetness she didn't know she needed until the first bite made her eyes fill again. Not from sadness this time, but release. She took a slow breath, then another. In that quiet moment, sitting across from a man she'd met barely an hour ago, she felt a strange, fragile truth bloom inside her. This man had shadows, but he was using them to shield her, not hurt her. And that kind of kindness, especially from someone like him, was the kind that changed lives. By the time Sarah left the restaurant lobby, Jennifer was already on her way to pick her up. The drive to her friend's apartment felt dreamlike, a blur of streetlights, tears, and a strange calm that followed the collapse of something toxic. Jennifer hugged her tightly, whispering the kinds of things Sarah didn't realize she needed to hear until she heard them. "You're safe. You're here. It's okay now." But safety was fragile in the days that followed, because Marcus didn't disappear quietly. The messages began almost immediately. Texts filled with apologies, threats, manipulation. 9 missed calls. For voicemails. Emails begging, demanding, pleading. Sarah blocked him, but he found new numbers. She changed her passwords, but somehow he still reached her. Every ping of her phone sent a jolt of fear through her ribs. And each time, she called the number on the small, heavy business card Luca had left with her. Then something remarkable happened. On day 3, Marcus showed up at her office. He didn't even make it through the door. A pair of security guards appeared out of nowhere. Men she had never seen before, men whose very presence made Marcus back away without a fight, and they walked him out. The receptionist later whispered, "They just appeared," like they were waiting. Sarah knew the truth. Someone had been. On day 7, Marcus's mother called. Her voice was laced with guilt and accusation. "You owe him a conversation. 3 years together means something." Sarah hung up, shaking, crying, and called the number again. She didn't know what was said on the other end. But Marcus's mother never contacted her again. By day 10, the messages stopped. The calls ended. The silence wrapped around her like a warm blanket. Sarah slept through the night for the first time in months. And she began to breathe again, not cautiously, not fearfully, but deeply. The kind of breathing that meant life was returning. But amid the calm, a truth lingered. When something frightened her, when Marcus showed up, when anxiety bubbled too high, the first number she reached for wasn't Jennifer's. It wasn't a co-worker's. It wasn't even the police. It was Luca's, because without meaning to, he had become something she didn't expect. A lifeline, a tether to safety, a voice that steadied her when the world felt shaky. And though she wouldn't admit it yet, she had begun to wonder not just who he was, but what he was. 2 weeks after the restaurant confrontation, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. It was small, tentative, but it was real. So when she dialed Luca's number, not because she was scared, not because she needed help, but simply to say thank you, she didn't expect the warmth that filled his voice when he answered. "You sound better," he said. "I am," she replied. "I owe you for that. You owe me nothing, but I am glad." There was a pause, and then quietly, "Are you calling for any reason besides gratitude?" Sarah hesitated. Her stomach fluttered. "If that dinner offer is still open," she whispered, "I'd like to take it." Another pause, longer, deeper. "It's open," he said, "but I should warn you, Sarah, nothing about my life is simple. I'm not asking for simple. No, but before you step into my world, you need to understand it. Then explain it to me," she said. Over dinner, there was a soft exhale, almost like a quiet smile in his breath. "Tonight," he said, "a car will pick you up at 7. I can drive myself. Humor me, at least for the first date." Those 2 words, first date, settled into her chest like a spark. That evening, Sarah sat in the back of a sleek, dark car, her fingers tracing the fabric of a simple black dress she hadn't worn in years. Her hair was down, not styled for anyone's approval, just her own comfort. When she arrived at the estate, Luca stood at the door, sleeves rolled to his elbows, looking nothing like the dangerous force he'd been in the restaurant. Here, he looked human. "You came," he said softly. "You doubted I would?" "I doubted you should," he replied. He offered his arm, an old-world gesture she hadn't experienced before. She took it. As he guided her through the house, he spoke gently. "This place belonged to my father. He built our world from difficult beginnings. Some of it honorable, some of it less so. I've spent years trying to turn our name into something cleaner." Sarah listened, not judging, just listening. He led her to a quiet terrace overlooking the city. A small table was set for two, candles flickering in the breeze. Moretti, she said softly. Marcus knew that name. Most people do, Luca replied. My family was influential in ways that gave us power and problems. So you are. I'm a businessman, he said. But my father, his world was different. I've spent years cleaning the stains he left behind. Some parts of that world are gone. Some remain. I'm not a criminal anymore, Sarah, but I have connections, and I use them when I must. She thought about Marcus, about the security guards who appeared from nowhere, about the silence that followed the threats. Her voice was gentle. Did you help me because you felt responsible? No, he said. He held her eyes. I helped you because when I saw you in that restaurant, trying to make yourself invisible, I saw someone who deserved better, someone who deserved to be protected. I've spent my life surrounded by danger. But his voice softened. You made me want to be gentle. Sarah felt her breath catch. Tenderness wasn't something she was used to. Not real tenderness. Not this. I'm not a simple man, Luca murmured. I won't pretend I am. I don't need simple, Sarah replied. I just need honesty. His eyes warmed, a shadow of relief passing through them. Then you will always have it. The rest of the evening flowed with slow, blooming warmth, stories shared, laughter discovered, vulnerabilities revealed. Sarah spoke of her own life, her fears, the way she had lost herself without realizing it. And Luca listened, really listened. At the end of the night, as he walked her to the car, he hesitated. If you believe second chances can save lives, he said softly, like this video. Then he stepped closer. May I see you again, Sarah? And she whispered the first answer that came straight from her heart. Yes. The seasons turned quietly, as if trying not to disturb the fragile new life unfolding between Sarah and Luca. What began with a single dinner, one that felt too beautiful to be real, slowly deepened into something solid, something steady, something that felt like standing on ground she had never known before. With Luca, silence was not punishment. Stillness wasn't danger, and love was not measured by how small she could make herself. Sarah began to grow. The change was slow at first, barely noticeable. She spoke more confidently. She stood a little taller. She laughed without looking over her shoulder. She made choices without waiting for permission. And then one morning, over coffee in Luca's sunlit kitchen, she said something that surprised even herself. I want to help women like me. Luca looked up from his cup, studying her face, the determination soft but unmistakable. You already have, he said, but if you want to build something, I'll help you. The foundation began as a whisper of an idea. A small office, a small team, a phone line, a promise. It carried Sarah's name only because Luca insisted it should. And though she protested, though she said she was not ready to lead anything, he simply answered, You already are. And over the weeks that followed, she proved him right. She learned how to run meetings, how to organize resources, how to speak to donors without shrinking, how to stand in front of women whose eyes carried the same fear she once lived in, and offer them a place to land. Every time she doubted herself, she remembered the woman she had been in that restaurant. Hands trembling, voice fading, heart caving inward. She remembered how she'd felt when Luca sat across from her, refusing to look away. And she thought, I want to be that for someone. Her transformation wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It built in layers, quiet, deliberate, powerful. And Luca watched all of it with silent pride. One evening, after a long day at the foundation, Sarah returned home to find Luca waiting on the terrace, bathed in golden dusk. There was a stillness in his posture, a weight in the moment she couldn't place. Come sit, he said softly. She crossed the terrace, her heartbeat whispering questions she couldn't form into words. Luca took her hands gently, running his thumb over her knuckles, as if committing every detail to memory. You've become someone extraordinary, he said. I always knew you could. But watching you step into your own strength, that has been the greatest privilege of my life. Sarah swallowed. I wouldn't be here without you. That's not true, he said. You were always meant for this. I only showed you a door. You walked through it. He reached into his pocket. Not quickly. not nervously, with reverence. And then he opened a small velvet box. Inside lay a ring, antique, delicate, with a sapphire held in gold. A piece of history, a piece of lineage, a piece of a life far older and more complicated than hers. This belonged to my grandmother, he said. She wore it through a war, through loss, through rebuilding her life from ashes. She believed it brought strength to the women who held it. Sarah covered her mouth with her hand, tears rushing to her eyes. Sarah, will you marry me? Her breath collapsed into a laugh, a cry, a whisper all at once. Yes, she said, voice trembling. Yes, I will. He slipped the ring onto her finger, not as a claim, but as a promise. And Sarah felt something she had never felt before, not desperation, not longing, not fear masquerading as devotion. She felt chosen, not for her silence, not for her obedience, but for her strength. That night, the world did not dramatically shift. No fireworks, no storms, just a deep, settling peace. Sarah was no longer the woman who hid behind her fear. She was the woman who rose out of it. And Luca, complex, shadowed, deeply loyal, stood at her side as she stepped into the life she was always meant to lead. The foundation had grown into something real, desks filled, phones ringing, volunteers trained. And on an unusually quiet afternoon, as a soft rain tapped against the windows, the front door opened and a young woman stepped inside. Her name was Rachel. She looked small in the doorway, her coat soaked through, her hair clinging to her cheeks. But what struck Sarah most wasn't the way Rachel stood. It was the way she didn't speak. Because silence like that carried a story. Sarah approached slowly, gently. Can I help you? Rachel looked up with hollow eyes, the kind that belonged to someone living in survival, not life. I don't know where else to go, she whispered. Those words pierced something inside Sarah, awakening a memory she wished didn't live so close to the surface. Come in, Sarah said softly. You're safe here. She led Rachel to a quiet room, offering her tea, a blanket, space to breathe. And when Rachel finally began to speak, the truth came out in broken pieces. I met him 5 months ago, Rachel said. He was everything I thought I wanted. Charming, smart, protective. And then it changed. Slowly at first, then all at once. Sarah felt a chill, because she knew this story. Not the details, never the details, but the pattern, the isolation, the manipulation, the guilt wrapped as affection, the fear disguised as loyalty. Sarah whispered, more to herself than anyone else. I know him, not the face, but the type. Rachel looked at her, startled. You do? Sarah nodded. And for the first time since walking through the door, Rachel's shoulders loosened, just a fraction, just enough to breathe. Over the next hour, Sarah shifted from leader to listener to protector. She arranged safe housing, made calls, logged evidence, ensured Rachel's phone would no longer be used as a tool against her. For years, Sarah had been the woman waiting for someone to save her. Now, she was the woman standing between danger and someone else. It was purpose. It was healing. It was justice shaped into compassion. And Rachel wasn't the only one who felt it. Luca arrived that evening to pick Sarah up. When he saw Rachel, trembling but cared for, he nodded with quiet approval. You did good today, he told Sarah. But she shook her head. She did. She chose to walk through our door. And that truth brought a soft smile to Luca's eyes. Because he knew, strength wasn't something Sarah had been given. It was something she had built. It happened 3 nights later. Sarah was finishing paperwork at home when the doorbell rang, a sharp, frantic sound cutting through the quiet of the house. She froze. Her breath stopped, because something about the way the bell rang told her this wasn't a visitor. This wasn't a delivery. This wasn't anything ordinary. She approached the door cautiously, peering through the small window, and her body went cold. Marcus stood on the porch, his hair disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes wild, and in his hand, a gun. A soft gasp escaped her lips. He stepped forward, voice trembling with something between desperation and madness. Sarah, please, just let me talk to you. She backed away slowly, heart hammering in her chest. I can't, he said. I can't lose you. You don't understand what you've done to me. Then he raised the gun, not aiming, not pointing, just holding it out like it was part of him he couldn't control. Sarah felt her legs weaken. Then suddenly, quiet footsteps behind her. She didn't have to turn. She felt him. Luca. He didn't push past her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush. He simply stepped into view beside her with a calmness so unnerving, so complete, it made Marcus falter. Put the gun down, Lucas said. His tone was almost gentle. Almost. Marcus shook his head violently. Stay away from me. Stay away from her. She's mine. You took her from me. She was never yours, Luca replied. Not for a moment. Marcus's voice broke. You think you're better than me? You think you can just take everything away? I didn't take anything, Lucas said. You lost it. By your own hand. Marcus's breath hitched. His arm wavered. His eyes darted between them, the torment twisting his features. And then, as if some final thread snapped inside him, he collapsed. The gun slipped from his fingers. He fell to his knees, sobbing and heaving broken gasps. I just wanted her to love me, he cried. I just wanted to fix it. Sarah pressed a hand to her mouth. Her knees weakened at the sight, not because she felt pity, but because this moment was closure made real. The danger that once controlled her life was now on the ground, undone not by violence, but by truth. Lucas stepped in front of her, not aggressively, but protectively, as several unmarked cars rolled silently up the driveway. Two men approached, calm and efficient, securing the weapon, lifting Marcus to his feet, and reciting his rights as he wept. Sarah's breath trembled, her fingers trembling as she gripped Luca's arm. You're safe, he whispered. It's over. And for the first time since the night in the restaurant, she believed him. If you stand with survivors, comment, no more fear. Because this moment was more than a confrontation. It was liberation. Marcus was taken away quietly, without spectacle, without struggle. The police report was already built from weeks of evidence. The restraining orders were airtight. The charges stacked, documented, undeniable. Sarah watched the car disappear down the street. The porch light flickered slightly, as if exhaling with her. Rachel, shaken but safe, clung to the edge of the doorway. Her eyes, fearful, confused, apologetic, met Sarah's. Is Izzy gone? Rachel whispered. Sarah took her gently by the shoulders. He can't hurt you, she said. And he can't hurt me. It's over. Rachel broke down, sobbing into her hands. Sarah held her, not as a leader, not as a survivor, but as someone who understood the weight of fear and the relief of freedom. Later that night, when the house had settled into quiet, Sarah searched for Luca. She found instead a small folded note on the table. You don't need me to stand between you and danger anymore. You have become your own protection. I will always be near, but this victory belongs to you. L. Tears warmed her cheeks. Not sad tears. Not afraid tears. Tears of purpose, of pride, of becoming. And the next morning, as the sunrise painted the city in soft gold, Sarah walked to the foundation's front door. The key felt different in her hand now, heavier, meaningful like the final symbol of her transformation. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and welcomed a new day not as the woman who once hid behind fear, but as the woman who built a place where fear had no power, a place where others could rise, just as she had, a place born from pain, shaped into strength. And as she walked inside, the story closed not with darkness, but with light. If you believe no one should be humiliated like this, hit subscribe, bullies won't. Comment, I stand for courage if you defend someone in danger. Share this story if you believe kindness can rewrite a life. Thank you for watching this story to the end. Please click subscribe, like, and share this video. Click on the screen to watch the next one.